I inherited the house in the spring of 1923. The letter arrived on an unseasonably warm March morning, the ink crisp and authoritative, informing me that my late uncle's estate in Bar Harbor, Maine, was now mine. It seemed like a godsend for a young widow like me, struggling to raise my daughter, Alice, after Edward's untimely death. The mansion was a towering relic of the Victorian age, with intricate woodwork and an almost oppressive grandeur. Its size was daunting, the room still filled with my uncle's belongings, forgotten books, furniture draped in white sheets, and the air of secrets held too long. But I needed this fresh start, so I convinced myself that the house could become a home. As I explored its shadowed halls, it became clear the attic was the heart of its mystery. The heavy wooden door resisted my first attempts to open it. The lock rusted with disuse. When it finally creaked open, the air that greeted me was thick with dust and a strange chill, despite the warmth of the day. It was there, among the cobweb trunks and forgotten keepsakes, that I found her. The doll was tucked into a corner, seated on a small rocking chair. She was porcelain, her blue glass eyes unervingly lifelike, her face cracked down the left cheek. Her dress, once white, was yellowed with age, and her painted lips seemed to smirk at me. Attached to her lap was a small note, the ink faded but legible. "Do not play with her." I chuckled at the absurdity. Who leaves a warning like that for a doll? I dismissed it as some relic of my uncle's eccentricities, a joke meant to amuse himself. Carefully, I carried the doll down to Alice's room, thinking it might brighten her spirits. The trouble began that night. Alice's scream jolted me awake, and I ran to her room. She was huddled under her blankets, sobbing uncontrollably. "She moved," Alice whispered. Her small hand pointed toward the doll, which now sat upright on the dresser where I had left it lying earlier. "Nonsense," I said, scooping the doll and inspecting it. "It's just a toy. See? It can't move on its own." But as I held it, a strange unease crept over me. The doll's blue eyes seemed to follow me, and for a fleeting moment, I swore the cracked side of its face twitched. I shook off the feeling, blaming it on fatigue. In the days that followed, the house grew restless. Chairs would scrape against the wooden floors at odd hours, as though invisible hands were rearranging them. Doors creaked open, even when I had locked them. Once, I found Alice's toys scattered across the parlor, though she swore she hadn't been in there. The laughter was the worst, a faint, girlish giggle that seemed to echo from the attic. I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was just the house settling, the product of my imagination. But my resolve cracked one evening when Alice refused to sleep in her room. "She watches me," Alice said, her voice trembling. "I don't want her here." I carried the doll back to the attic that night, my hands shaking. The stairwell felt colder with every step, and I could have sworn the doll's glass eyes glimmered in the dim light of my lantern. I set her on an old rocking chair and left without looking back. Sleep eluded me that night. My mind replayed Alice's terror and the strange events of the past weeks. Around midnight, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of small footsteps descending the attic stairs. Lantern in hand, I ventured out into the hall. My breath caught as I saw her. The doll stood at the base of the attic stairs, a rusty knife clutched in her porcelain hand. I screamed, dropping the lantern. The flame erupted instantly, licking hungrily at the wooden floorboards. The fire spread faster than I thought possible, engulfing the hallway and climbing the walls. I grabbed Alice and fled, the heat and smoke suffocating us as we stumbled out into the night. We watched from a safe distance as the mansion burned, its towering structure reduced to a skeletal frame of ash and embers. I held Alice tightly, whispering reassurances, though I felt no relief. In the days that followed, investigators combed through the ruins, but found no trace of the doll. I should have felt relieved, but instead, dread settled deep in my chest. Months passed, and we left Bar Harbor behind, determined to start anew. But I couldn't escape the nightmares. The cracked face, the blue eyes, the faint sound of laughter. Years later, I overheard hikers speaking about the ruins of the old mansion. They claimed to have seen something strange. A porcelain doll sitting on a rock, her eyes fixed on the charred remains. I never returned to Bar Harbor, but I know she's still there, waiting for someone foolish enough to bring her back into their home. And though I escape with my life, I often wonder if the curse left its mark on me. Because some nights, when the wind is just right, I still hear her laughter. I remember the first time I saw Black Hollow Manor. The skeletal remains of the grand estate loomed against the pale English sky, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring into my soul. I was in desperate need of inspiration, and as an artist, I had always been drawn to places with stories. Black Hollow Manor had plenty of those, whispered in the dim light of the village pub. A cursed place, they warned, shaking their heads. No good ever came of Black Hollow, but my curiosity, stubborn as always, got the better of me. Armed with my sketchbook and a camera, I ventured into the estate one chilly autumn afternoon. The air was heavy with an unnatural silence, the kind that seemed to muffle even the crunch of leaves beneath my boots. The inside was worse. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the dusty floor, and the air felt damp and stagnant. As I wandered through the halls, my eyes caught something in the corner of the parlor, a doll. It sat on a decaying armchair, its porcelain face framed by ringlets of golden hair, faded by time. Its eyes, a piercing shade of blue, seemed almost alive, following me as I moved around the room. I shook off the unease creeping up my spine and picked it up, examining it. It was exquisite, eerily lifelike. A perfect muse, I murmured, tucking it into my bag. Back in my studio, I placed the doll on a stool by the window. The golden hour sunlight cast an almost ethereal glow on its face. I sketched furiously, capturing every curve of its features, every shadow and glint of its glassy eyes. That night, I woke suddenly, the room drenched in a suffocating stillness. Something felt wrong. My gaze darted to the stool where I had left the doll. It wasn't there. Instead, it sat on my desk, its head tilted slightly, its lips curled in a faint, mocking smile. My heart pounded, but I told myself I must have moved it and forgotten. Exhaustion could play tricks on the mind. I picked it up, its cool porcelain body unnervingly solid in my hands, and returned it to the stool. The following days were worse. Every time I looked at my sketches of the doll, I was horrified by what I saw. My once delicate lines had transformed into jagged, chaotic strokes, the doll's face twisted into grotesque expressions that I didn't remember drawing. I began hearing things at night, soft whispers that seemed to come from the corner of the room where the doll sat. They were faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but they grew louder, distinct. Evelyn, the voice would coo, almost playful. Don't you want to hear my story? Sleep eluded me, and my work became frantic, feverish. I couldn't stop sketching the doll, as if my hand had a will of its own. The whispers became more frequent, weaving tales of a young girl who had lived in Black Hollow Manor, a child who had died tragically, though the doll never revealed how. Desperate for answers, I went to the village library. Buried in the archives, I found the story of Clara Winthrop, the last resident of Black Hollow Manor. She had been just 7 years old when she died, her cause of death shrouded in mystery. The librarian, an elderly woman with tired eyes, caught me staring at a faded photograph of Clara. She loved that doll, the librarian said, her voice barely above a whisper. Said it spoke to her. After her death, the doll was found in the parlor, just sitting there like it was waiting for something or someone. I felt a chill run through me, but I couldn't leave it alone. That night, I decided to return the doll to the manor. It was the only way to rid myself of its cursed presence. The journey back was a blur, the doll heavy in my bag, as if it didn't want to go. When I reached the parlor, I placed it back on the decaying armchair where I had found it. It's over, I whispered, relief washing over me. But it wasn't. As I turned to leave, I felt something cold and sharp claw on my face. I screamed, stumbling backward, and saw the doll, its lifeless body animated with a terrifying ferocity. Its glassy eyes gleamed with malice as it lunged at me again, its porcelain fingers scratching and tearing. I barely escaped, slamming the manor's door behind me. My face bled from countless scratches, and my mind was a fractured mess. But the worst came after. The whispers followed me home. The sketches I tried to destroy reappeared, more twisted than before. My reflection in the mirror began to change, my features subtly altering, resembling the doll's hauntingly perfect face. And then one day, I looked at my own hands and realized they were no longer mine. The flesh was pale and smooth, cold to the touch, like porcelain. I'm writing this now as a warning, though I doubt it will help. I felt the last shreds of my humanity slipping away, and I know what's coming. Soon, I will disappear just as Clara did. And when you find the doll, because you will, don't take it. Burn it, smash it, do whatever it takes to destroy it. But I fear it's too late. The curse has already spread, and it's always looking for its next victim. When they find my studio, they'll see a doll sitting on the stool by the window, its blue eyes gleaming. And if they look closely, they'll see something chillingly familiar in its features, a trace of me. Don't let it be you.